So hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy previous year questions analysis. So till yesterday we have discussed up to paper 3, general studies paper 3 of UPSC mains examination 2022. So in today's discussion we will be starting a discussion with the general studies paper 4, that is ethics, integrity and aptitude, along with the case studies. Okay, so this program has been started particularly to enhance your answer presentation and structuring skills so that it will help you score more marks in your mains examination. So the first question that we are going to start this session is with a question on wisdom. Okay, so the question here saying that wisdom is actually lies in knowing what to reckon with and what to overlook. Okay, now wisdom actually lies in understanding or knowing what to reckon, so what to adopt or what to overlook. Now ethics is particularly very important for upcoming civil servants. In order to inculcate the ethical values, this paper was introduced. So therefore in this context, an officer being engrossed with the periphery, ignoring the core issues before him. Okay, so there are certain issues which may be categorized as core issues and the periphery issues. Periphery issues are the issues which are at the boundaries. Okay, so an officer who is engrossed with the periphery or the boundaries and ignoring the core issues before him is no rare in the bureaucracy. So this question has been saying that officers very often ignoring the core issues and taking care of the periphery issues is not new in the bureaucracy. So in this context, do you agree that such preoccupation of an administrator leads to travesty of justice to the cause of effective service delivery and good governance? Okay, so critically evaluate. Right, so this is just a 150 word answer and 10 marks question, and the second part of the question, it is asking that do you agree that such preoccupation of an administrator leads to travesty of justice to the cause of effective service delivery and good governance? So this question has two parts and you have to address both the parts in this answer. Right, so while you write the introduction, you just introduce the question. So the art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook. Okay, when we say that we are wise, we have the wisdom, so that certainly means that it is an art of knowing what to reckon and what to overlook. So this is actually a quote which is given by William James. Okay, so this quote is given by William James and this quote is also related to the or relevant to the question. Okay, so when you are starting ethics answer, you can start with any relevant quote because that would be particularly impactful while making your answer more and more attractive. Okay, so this question has also started with a relevant quote. So this quote is given by William James. So he is father of psychology in USA. So now accordingly, wisdom can be defined as the ability to use our knowledge and experience to make good decisions and judgments. What is the definition of wisdom? Now wisdom is actually defined as our ability, a capability to use our existing knowledge, to use our pre-existing knowledge and experiences to make good decisions and judgments. So therefore in ethics, the wisdom plays a very important or very key role. Now if you look at the ancient Greek philosophers like Plato, Socrates and Aristotle, so they have emphasized more and more on wisdom. Okay, now in this context, the second part of the question which is asking that an officer who is engrossed with the periphery and ignoring core issues before him is not rare in the bureaucracy. So we need to write the reasons. So what are the reasons why bureaucracy has not been taking care of the core issues, why they are more and more engrossed with the periphery of the different issues? Now firstly, we need to talk about the escapist attitude. For example, an officer who is trying to escape taking up the responsibilities, and this is prevalent in the Indian bureaucracy. Okay, so escapists are actually people who want to create their own reality. Okay, so they wanted to create their own reality and they do not listen to the actual problem. So what exactly is the problem? They don't listen, but rather they wanted to create their own reality. So they have their own vision. So this is the actual problem with the people who have the escapist attitude. So they fail to see the core issue. Okay, so whatever the core issue in a particular problem, they fail to see the core issue. So but they're very often concerned with the things they want to see in the problem. Okay, so they very often or more often focus on issues which they wanted to see in the problem. Now after that, we need to talk about the elitism in the bureaucracy. Elitism in bureaucracy is also another major problem. So elitism is actually inherited version of British colonial administrative legacy. Okay, so this is inherited version of British colonial administration. Now we all know that British have ruled India for around 200 years. So such a long rule by the British colonialists, so therefore we have inherited certain colonial legacies. Okay, so in that bureaucratic elitism is one such colonial legacy. So civil servants very often see themselves as a masters rather than servants serving the public for greater good. Now if you look at the general administration or civil servants, you generally see the elitism. Okay, so their behavior, their attitude with the people is with like a masters rather than they serving the public for the greater good. So this is the main problem in the bureaucracy. Now after that, the bureaucratic inertia is also another major or serious problem that we are facing. Now bureaucratic inertia actually refers to a position in which bureaucratic principles and operations of an institution become so complex. So it becomes so complex and time consuming that they prevent the efficient operation of the company's core activities. Okay, so this is the problem with the bureaucratic inertia. Now after that, the ego defensive attitude is also another major problem in the bureaucracy. Okay, so what exactly is the ego defensive attitude? Now ego defensive attitude is an officer who is defending his egoistic behavior rather than conforming to the rules and regulations, rather than showing empathy and compassion towards the weaker sections. Rather, he has adopted the ego defensive attitude. So holding attitudes that actually protect our self-esteem or actually justify our own actions that make us feel guilty. Okay, so an officer justifying his behavior that actually make him or her guilty. Okay, now apart from the above mentioned four reasons for officers looking at just the boundary or the periphery, not taking care of the core issues. So after that, the lack of compassion and empathy is also another major problem. Now if you look at the bureaucrats, they very often adopt the apathetic attitude towards the weaker sections, vulnerable sections. For example, imagine a situation where a pensioner go to the government office for pension. Okay, so he's despite the eligibility, he's not given the pension. So in order to receive the pension, he reaches to the government office, and where the apathetic attitude of the government servants make this problem, they make this issue more and more problematic for the vulnerable sections or for that disabled individual. So therefore, apathetic attitude of the bureaucracy or the civil servants are very common in the Indian bureaucracy. Okay, so they are very often apathetic to the state affairs and even the well-being of the people. So they generally don't care of the well-being of the people. Of course, I mean, we cannot make these sweeping generalizations. Rather, few hard-working civil servants are also working for the well-being of the people. Now after that, the bounded ethicality is also another major reason. So bounded ethicality actually means that it is the idea that our ability to make the ethical choices is often limited or restricted because of internal and external pressures. Since we face several internal and external pressures, our ability to make ethical choices is often limited. Okay, so it is limited by our internal and external pressures. Now after that, the rule bound rather than value bound. We should also talk about this. Okay, so there are certain rules and regulations for every civil servant. So they are actually following these rules and regulations. However, while following the rules and regulations, while being objective when performing their duties, they often neglect the values. So values are also very important. Values involves showing empathy, compassion, and attitude, a right attitude, emotional intelligence towards the weaker sections is also very important. Now, if you look at the Indian bureaucracy, it is very often ridden with the rules and regulations. Okay, so in its ideal form, bureaucracy is impersonal and rational, and it is very often based on rules rather than ties of kinship, friendship, or patrimonial or charismatic authority. However, bureaucracy should never forget the border of value orientation. So, for example, values like justice, equality, fraternity. So those values should not be forgotten by the bureaucracy, because so they help in generating the public trust about the bureaucracy and the government. Even in order to ensure a greater trust among the public, confidence among the public about the bureaucracy, it is very important that these officers should have values. So they should be value bound along with the rule bound. Okay, because this ensures the welfare of the people. Okay, so India is often called as a welfare state. Our goal is becoming a welfare state. Now, welfare state as an ideal which is mentioned in the directive principles of state policy. So the actual objective of DPSPs is to make sure that India is a welfare state. Okay, so we also have the ideal that we wanted to ensure maximum governance, and minimum government. Okay, so our ideals, our aspiration should also be in line with this objective. Right now, in this context, you say that I completely agree that such preoccupation of an administrator, actually preoccupation means we generally don't taking care of the peripheral core issues, but we are preoccupied with the peripheral issues. So such preoccupation of an administrator leads to travesty of justice, to cause of effective service delivery and good governance. Why? Because of the following reasons. Firstly, it leads to the breach of the public trust. As I have already told you, public trust is a very important value. Therefore, in this context, it leads to the breach of public trust. How? Because it may lead to the breakdown of the existing social contract between the government and public at large. Now, if you properly understand the concept of social contract, it is very famous in the political philosopher. Several political philosophers have come up with the social contract. So the contract is between the citizens and the state. Citizens and the states is called as a social contract. Okay, so for example, in order to provide security and in order to ensure the rights of every citizen, so they have gone for a contract with the state. So hence state was created. Okay, so therefore it breaches the public trust. Okay, it may lead to the breakdown of social contract between the government and the public at large. Now after that, the selective discrimination is also another major important value. Now in selective discrimination very often comes with the term nepotism, favoritism. You very often come across the terms. Okay, so in this context, poor and vulnerable sections are hit drastically if we follow the selective discrimination, and because they have the limited means of livelihood, they have the limited means of income and survival. So it is very important that we should take care of the poor and vulnerable sections of the society. But generally with the selective discrimination, what happens? The poor and vulnerable are the most suffering section of the society. So during COVID times, migrants and unorganized workers and domestic workers were hit badly because of the pandemic. Now after that, we need to talk about the exclusivity of the aspect. For example, the rules and regulations start to favor only few. Okay, rules and regulations are made to ensure discipline among the civil servants. However, when rules and regulations becoming hurdles for good service delivery and good governance, then it creates a lot of problems. Okay, so therefore inequity rises as we have not excluded, the privilege sections, privileges of service delivery has become the exclusive domain of the haves. Okay, no exclusivity. So when our services is exclusively focusing on few sections of the society, that is well off sections of the society, and neglecting the weaker sections of the society, that also becomes a very very problematic. So due to corruption and even the unholy nexus among the corporate groups, bureaucrats, and the political leaders, very often corruption, these problems also result in exclusivity. So after that, the inefficiency is also another major problem. When we talk about the inefficiency, the policy implementation, and not just policy implementation and even delivery of government programs and schemes, there's some sort of inefficiency. Even though the government has been coming up with various reforms and initiatives to ensure efficiency of service delivery, for example e-governance, we can talk about in order to ensure efficiency. And we can also talk about Mission Karma Yogi, launched by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So therefore, because of the programs and policies are not implemented in its truest spirit, but in purely in a mechanical way or mechanical manner. So when we are implementing these policies and programs in a mechanical manner with lack of intent, so that would not significantly benefit the weaker sections of the society. So the overall objective is to uplift the weaker sections. So that is in line with the Gandhi's idea of Antyodaya and Sarvodaya. Right? So this is how you have to address this question. So even though it seems a bit lengthy, but you have to write this answer in just 150 words. So in conclusion, the travesty of justice is considered as injustice. Okay, so it is disguised as justice. Okay, now very often when we talk about the travesty of justice, it is injustice, but it is disguised as doing justice, because the officers have been taking care of the peripheral issues and ignoring the core issues. So that is where actually the problem starts, and this is perpetuated if an administrator focuses on periphery, ignoring the core issue. Okay, so this is what happens. So this is how injustice is being served to the different sections of the society. So the problems like malnutrition, gender discrimination, or the failure of land reforms in India is actually evidently because we have not cared to touch upon these core issues. So in fact, these are the core issues. So if you look into the malnutrition, gender discrimination, and even the failure of the land reforms are the core issues, but still those issues were not solved because the officers and the government were not taking care of the core issues. Okay, so this is how you have to write the conclusion. And the next question that we're going to discuss is about the intellectual competency and the moral qualities. Empathy and compassion are some of the other vital attributes that facilitate the civil servants to become more competent in tackling the crucial issues or tackling critical decisions. Now this is if you look at this question, this is a bit lengthy question. Okay, so and this is also a statement based question. This is not exactly a question, but it is a statement based question. So it is you very often face difficulties while writing answers to these statement based questions. Now explain this with a suitable illustrations. Now when you confront with these type of questions, first identify what exactly is the core of the answer. Okay, so what is exactly the question has been asking? What is the demand of the question? Now if you carefully look at the question, apart from having the intellectual competency and moral qualities, empathy, compassion are some of the other vital attributes. Okay, so intellectual competency and moral qualities are also important, but apart from these qualities, compassion and empathy are some vital attributes for every civil servant. So that facilitates civil servants to be more competent in tackling crucial issues and tackling critical decisions. Now in this context, you have to write how empathy, compassion as vital attributes ensure more competency for the civil servants. Okay, so the essence of this question is about empathy and compassion. Now firstly, you need to define what is empathy and compassion, or try to understand empathy. Okay, so there are different terms like apathy and empathy, and then sympathy, and then compassion. Okay, so these are different values. Now when we talk about empathy, so it is feeling for someone. So we have been showing feeling for someone. So that means that I understand what you're going through and I have been there. So you are assuring your friend that you are there in any problem he or she is going through. And what's the difference between empathy and compassion? Now compassion generally means feeling for someone. You're feeling for someone and you're ready to help your friend in his or her difficult times. Okay, so it is generally desire to help. I can understand your distress and I want you to help, so I want to help. So this is the basic difference between empathy and compassion. Now after that, you just briefly define empathy and compassion. I have already told you what is the basic difference between empathy and compassion. Now empathy and compassion are important qualities for civil servants. For every civil servant, empathy and compassion are one of the most important qualities, okay, so to possess, and they can help them to be more effective in their roles. Okay, so empathy and compassion will help them to become more effective, more competent in their respective roles. Now empathy essentially means ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Okay, so the definition of empathy is understanding and sharing the feelings of others. Now after that, well, compassion is actually desire to alleviate the suffering and help those in need. So this is compassion. This is the basic difference between empathy and compassion. So in this context, there are several ways in which empathy and compassion can facilitate the work of civil servants. How empathy and compassion facilitate the civil servants? So facilitate the work of civil servants. How it helps the civil servants? Firstly, it helps in improved communication and understanding. Now when you are a civil servant, it is very important that you have a robust understanding and communication skills. So that is how you develop emotional intelligence, and that is how you interact with the normal public. So by demonstrating empathy and compassion, so when you demonstrate empathy and compassion as a civil servant towards the public, civil servants can create more positive and understanding of the existing environment. Okay, so they can understand the existing environment, the feelings of the people, and what is the general behavior of the people. Okay, so therefore it will help in improving the communication of the officers. Okay, so when he understands the general feelings of the people, so when he has a robust communication skills with the people, then he could effectively deal with any public issue, and that is the essence of civil services. And after that, the greater trust and respect can also be possible with both empathy and compassion. So civil servants who show empathy and compassion towards others are more likely to be trusted and respected by the people. So when civil servants have been showing empathy and compassion, so when they are moved by something happening to a weaker sections, or when they have the value like Gandhi's talisman. So what he suggested in talisman, that whatever you're doing, it is benefiting the weaker sections or the vulnerable sections. Okay, Gandhi's talisman is also very important. So you can write in ethics and even in essay. So what he suggested, so when you are moved by or whatever you're doing, so before doing that, so when you think that the work you're doing will benefit the weaker sections or the vulnerable sections of the society, then only you do that particular work. So Gandhi's talisman is also very important. So in this context, empathy and compassion will develop trust and respect towards the civil servants. Okay, so therefore in this context, this particularly help in building strong relationships and create more collaborative and supportive environment with the people. Okay, now after that, empathy and compassion will also help in better decision making. So in civil services, better decision making always plays a very important and a very key role. The civil servants are very often expected that they take decisions at an appropriate time in a appropriate manner. So therefore, civil servants who are able to understand the needs of and the perspectives of others more likely to make decisions. So when they understand others, when they understand the needs of the other sections of the society, particularly the vulnerable sections of the society, So those decisions will be considered as better decisions. So they ensure good governance and also better administration. Okay, so thus this can help in further improving the quality of service delivery. So the overall objective of every administration or every government agency is better or quality service delivery, and that lead to better outcomes for the poor people so they are actually serving. Now after that, increased motivation and engagement. Now every civil servant, now what is the need, the basic minimum need is that, so they are always motivated, they should always engage with the people. So that is how they should know about the problems of the people. So civil servants who are very often motivated by desire to help others and make positive impact in the lives of the people are more likely engaged and motivated in their actual work. Okay, so this can lead to the better performance and improved outcomes among the civil servants. So when we talk about an example, a civil servant who is responsible for managing a food assistance program. Generally, when we provide food assistance provided when we face drought. So when we have any disaster like cyclone, earthquake, tsunami, so we generally set up a relief camps and provide food grains for the vulnerable sections. So therefore, in this context, managing food assistance program, a civil servant may use empathy and compassion to understand the actual needs of the people. Okay, so they serve to make decisions that reflect those needs and that particularly help the deserved sections of the society. Now you have addressed the demand of the question, and in the conclusion you just have to write the significance or the need to inculcate the qualities like empathy and compassion. Okay, so empathy and compassion will help build trust and respect among the people. Okay, so with the people they serve, and which can further help in creating more collaborative and supportive environment. Overall, empathy and compassion can be crucial qualities for the civil servants to possess in order to be effective in their roles and make positive impact on the people they serve. Okay, so this is how you have to conclude this answer. Now in the conclusion itself, so we have emphasized more and more on the significance and the need to inculcate the values like empathy and compassion among the civil servants. Okay, so the next question that we are going to discuss is about the rules and regulations that are actually followed by the civil servants. Now the first three questions are very lengthy questions, and this is how UPSC has been asking questions from ethics section, particularly from the past 2 years. So therefore you have to be very careful, and when you are facing such a lengthy questions and you have to write just 150 word answers, you have to be very careful. You have to understand the essence of these questions. The rules and regulations provided to all civil servants are same. Okay, so same rules are provided for all civil servants. So yet there is some difference in the performance of these rules and regulations. Okay, so even though the rules and regulations provided for all the civil servants are same, yet there's a difference in the performance. But that means that a few civil servants follow these rules, and few civil servants may not follow these rules. Apart from these rules, they also compassionate, empathetic towards the weaker sections. Okay, so it says that there's a difference in the performance of the officers even though rules are same for all. So this is also a statement. First part is a statement. Now positive minded officers are able to interpret the rules and regulations in favor of the case and achieve success. So it says that there are some positive minded officers and also the negative minded officers. So generally what positive minded officers do, they able to interpret the rules and regulations. So the interpretation is generally in favor of the case and achieve success. So secondly, there are another group of people. So they are negative minded people or the negative minded officers. So they are unable to achieve the goals by interpreting the same rules and regulations against the case. And we need to discuss this with illustrations. Illustrations means you have to give either examples. Okay, so either examples or you can write any relevant case study on this. Now case study means normal case study. Rules and regulations, the source of rules and regulations are constitution, laws, acts, rules and regulations. Okay, so this is actually the basic framework or the basic structure of rules and regulations, or the source of rules and regulations. Now, rules and regulations are very often the sources of ethical guidance or ethical code of conduct for the officers. So they actually clarify the values to be used and also the procedure to be followed. So what are the values that should be used and what are the procedures they should be followed. So these rules and regulations are same for all and need to be implemented in a situation as per the task and ground situation or the ground realities. Okay, so in this context we have basically defined what exactly rules and regulations. Okay, so rules and regulations are generally the source of ethical guidance or ethical conduct. Okay, so which actually clarify the values to be used and procedure to be followed. So these rules and regulations are actually same for all and need to be implemented based on the situation and as per this task and ground realities. So according to the United Nations Development Program, an ethical public officer, so it is defined as the United Nations Development Program has defined an ethical officer promotes the socio-economic development and unethical behaviors threaten the development and loss of trust in the public institutions. Okay, so I mean it has defined both the ethical public officer and the unethical public officer. It talked about that means an officer with the positive mindset as well as the officer with the negative mindset. Now in this context, according to United Nations Development Program, an ethical public officer promotes socio-economic development. Along with that, an unethical public officer or unethical behavior actually threaten the development and it will also lead to the loss of trust in the public institutions. So that is the major threat. We should not lose the public trust, and because that is the essence of good government and that is also essence of the welfare state. Now in this context, what is the difference in approach, positive minded officers and the negative minded officers? Now firstly we discuss about the positive minded officers. The positive minded officers interpret the rules and regulations to provide justice in an efficient manner and use their discretion to help the people. Okay, so this is how positive minded officers usually interpret the rules and regulations. So even though they are working in an objective manner, so they also take care of various other values. Okay, so they interpret the rules and regulations to provide justice in an efficient manner and use their discretion to help the people. Secondly, the positive minded officers ensure proper implementation. So they ensure proper implementation of these schemes and they also carry out successfully in their proper way, ensuring legal and moral protocols. Okay, so they also ensure legal and moral protocols when they are properly implementing these schemes. Okay, so even though they are implementing these schemes, even though they are empathetic and compassionate, they are not derailing from the rules and regulations. So after that, they also ensure that the scheme is carried out for the purpose it was created. For example, a particular scheme has been created and he identifies beneficiaries. From that particular scheme, and he ensures that the identification of the beneficiaries and even the delivery of the welfare scheme benefits is always foolproof. Okay, so therefore it was created rather than worrying about the administrative aspects of implementation of the scheme. Now when we talk about an example, because it says that illustrate with the examples. So when we talk about the example, when an officer at a bank sends an official at home of senior citizen for the banking services instead of refusing for the service. Okay, this can also be an example. Okay, so this actually means that a bank officer actually refusing to provide services to the senior citizen, he actually visits the home of a senior citizen in order to provide service, and that is the essence of a positive minded officer. Okay, now After that, we need to talk about the negative minded officers. So there are also negative minded officers. So they always find loopholes in the existing rules. So therefore those loopholes will be exploited by these negative minded officers for the benefit or their own personal benefits. For example, you often see corruption and the linkages between the corporates and nepotism, favoritism. Okay, so they further delay the process when they find these loopholes. Rather than setting a proper framework in order to fix these loopholes, they actually find the loopholes to delay the process. So they use their own discretion to harass people. So they are the negative minded people. They have the negative mindset, and they often find the loopholes to harass the people. Secondly, they often focus on implementation of the scheme, and they're very often being insensitive. Now it is often suggested that officers needs to be sensitive towards the weaker sections of the society and the vulnerable sections of the society. So however, the negative minded people always insensitive to the issues arising out during the implementation of a particular scheme. Now that will not benefit the people. So in fact, it also breaks down the trust between the government and the citizens, because citizens are ultimately at the receiving end. So therefore, in this context, the negative minded officers very often being insensitive, and if they find any loopholes, they start harassing the people as well. Now even they also practice corruption, and they are at the forefront when it comes to the unholy nexus with the local politicians and even the corporate groups. So example is denying food grains at a fair price shops or a ration shop to a person because his biometric details were not updated in the database due to the connectivity issues. So despite he is eligible to receive the food grains, but his biometric details were not updated because of the connectivity issues, and refusing or denying to provide food grains to that eligible individual is actually done by the negative minded officers, and that should not be done. Okay, officers always be empathetic and compassionate. They also follow rules and regulations. Okay, so this is how you have to you can write some suggestions in the conclusion. So how can we bring in more and more positive minded officers rather than the negative minded officers? So with these suggestions, you can conclude the answer. So you can also write about the vision of minimum government and maximum governance. You can also write about the welfare state in the DPS piece in the conclusion. Okay, so this is how you can conclude this answer. So that's all for today, and tomorrow also we will discuss few more ethics questions. So please like the video if you really like our work, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.